welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for the Charleston Light Opera Guild panel discussion and live Q&A. With me this evening, I have Nina Denton-Pasinetti, the Artistic Director at the Charleston Light Opera Guild, and Board President Scott Jarrell. Welcome. Thank you guys for joining us this evening.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thanks for having us.
We appreciate you being a part of Festival Goes Virtual this summer. I know that we had some other plans for the Light Opera Guild this summer as a part of Festival, but thankful for you all jumping in and being willing to be a part of virtual with this reimagined panel discussion with the Light Opera Guild. I know we've got a lot of people that are excited to hear the ins and outs and be able to ask you guys any Light Opera Guild question that they have.
We're looking forward to answering. It's definitely, we love Festival. We love being part of Festival. So, once we were approached with this opportunity, we definitely wanted to kind of jump in. And I think the panel that we put together, I think it's very interesting, a lot of good information. So I think you'll enjoy it.
Yes, there's actually been about 32 people direct music for the Light Opera Guild, but in the past several years, these three guys that are being interviewed are the ones that have done it most of the time. So they're going to give you an overall picture, and one of them has worked with us since childhood in different capacities. So it'll be interesting.
I know we're all really looking forward to hearing from him. All right. Well, I am going to go ahead and start the panel discussion. For all of you watching, feel free in the comment section as the panel discussion goes along to ask your questions. We're going to be keeping an eye on that, but we will be holding the answer portion until after the panel discussion is completed. But feel free in the meantime to ask questions as you go along that Nina and Scott can answer at the end as well.
Good evening. I'm Nina Denton-Pasinetti, Artistic Director of the Charleston Light Opera Guild. For the past 71 years, the Light Opera Guild has entertained, excited, and inspired audiences with high-caliber musical theater offered at an affordable price. Casts have varied from 2 to 100 in our 254 mounted productions, and the group has provided an outlet for singers, actors, dancers, instrumentalists, behind-the-scenes workers, and volunteers. Founded in 1949, it wasn't until 1959 and the emergence of the former Civic Center Little Theater, now Coliseum and Convention Center Little Theater, that the group found a permanent home for its fall and spring musicals. Summer musicals began in the 1970s. Today, you may see us doing musicals in a variety of spaces, still at the Little Theater at the Coliseum and Convention Center, also at the Clay Center, sometimes at the Culture Center, and often at the theater where we own our own building, the Charleston Light Opera Guild Theater. We have presented a new production and premiered it during Festival Charleston for the past 15 years. This year, in light of the COVID-19 restrictions, we are hosting a panel discussion with three important musicians to the Charleston Light Opera Guild. Introducing our panel of musicians. First, John Marshall, who needs little introduction to Charleston Light Opera Guild audiences. He has performed with the group for innumerable years since youth. He has also conducted for the last 40 years, and we have worked on nearly 90 shows together, both in Charleston and in professional summer stock. Second, David Patrick. David joined us in 2012 as pianist and accompanist for the orchestra for The Color Purple. David continues to play piano for lots of our productions, but also has conducted 4 productions, both in our Intimate Guild Theater and at the Clay Center. And last, Bobby Hodges Jr. Bobby first conducted productions in the 2000s. We've worked together on about 40 shows, but he also is a multi-instrumentalist that played in dozens of our orchestras and also has been on our stage as a singer, dancer, actor. Gentlemen, I'm going to ask each of you how you've remained musically active during these last few months of social distancing. John.
I think the key word is active. I was working on Footloose prior to everything shutting down. That was the show I was going to conduct this summer. And with that gone, I'm really not conducting for the Light Opera Guild the rest of this year. And, you know, I'm also a music director at St. Matthew's Episcopal Church in Charleston, and that has shut down. So being active is very difficult. Basically what I do is listen to my LPs on my stereo at home, and that's how I stay active with music.
I put down my instruments. When we found out that we weren't going to be able to do Memphis, I just really just didn't want to do anything for a while. It was kind of disappointing, so I just listened to my playlist. That's it.
Well, I'm a music teacher at DuPont Middle School, so I've been posting music assignments and things for my chorus students and music students and interacting with that. We can't really do rehearsals, but we can still try to keep something up like that. I play piano for 2 churches, and I've been recording music for them to post on their social media and their online services. And I'm trying to start learning how to play guitar, so we'll see where that goes.
John, we've worked on so many musicals together, and we've recently, at the end of 2019, worked on Oklahoma, a production we hadn't resurrected for the Light Opera Guild in 20 years. And I know that was a significant production from the 70th anniversary point, as well as all the people that returned to celebrate with us. Will you just give us a glimmer of what it meant to be working on that production at the end of 2019?
Well, I don't think I've enjoyed anything more. Oklahoma is a very special show because it ushered in the Broadway musical era, the modern musical era.
Folks, we are gathered here to moan and groan over our brother Judge Fry, who hung himself up by a rope in the smokehouse. And then wailing, some of them mourning.
For such a special event as our 70th anniversary, I don't think we could have picked a better show. And I've always wanted to conduct it. I worked on this show. In fact, I worked on it with Nina in high school years ago, but I've never done it with the Light Opera Guild, so I was looking forward to conducting it. It's a magnificent score, and it also gives our young people today who are not that familiar with the classics a chance to really work on one of the great ones.
Yes, David, we had the opportunity to work together on another classic, not just Oklahoma by Rodgers and Hammerstein, but also The Sound of Music. And that was premiered in 2020, the only production we've been able to do thus far in 2020, and it was at the Clay Center. Now, you shared that it was a favorite of yours since boyhood, so please tell the group what that opportunity was to conduct that in that large space, and it was so well received.
I've always loved The Sound of Music. I kind of grew up on it. It's my mom's favorite musical. I used to watch it at my grandmother's house, and then I saw the Guild's production in 2004 from the audience, so I was really excited when I was asked to conduct it. I really just think we got everything right with that production. We had great leads. The show was led by Rudy Arrowwood, who did a wonderful job as Maria, along with our other principal cast. We had a great group of kids that played the Von Trapp children. There were 7 of them, ranging in age from 7 to probably 17. And I was so impressed with their ability to handle the music. I mean, we didn't simplify anything in that show. We did the harmony the way it was supposed to be done, 5 parts in some parts. And then we had a great ensemble too. Our nuns were fantastic. They had a great sound when you put them all together. And one of the things I was most proud about with the show was the orchestra. I believe it was the largest orchestra we've ever had in the history of the Light Opera Guild. It was 26 people, and it really just gave the show the power and the sort of sweeping score quality that it really needed to have in a space like the Clay Center. We were also able to get the set and costumes from the national tour. So I just really think everything came together well for that show.
Bobby and I worked on a 2019 summer production of Shrek, and we both started out thinking we were not going to like that production. We didn't think we liked the subject matter, and we both fell in love with it. It was a big surprise to us. But we also experienced great disappointment after March 13th when we had to stop rehearsing Memphis after weeks, about 6 weeks of rehearsal. And Bobby really went into the music in depth. It was to be a wonderful production. We thought we would just delay it and be able to pick it back up, maybe insert it in the summer. But no, we have lost doing that production during 2020. Bobby, please share the disappointment you felt, the cast felt, and something about the quality of that show that told the birth of rock and roll.
It was very disappointing. We really did delve into the music pretty deep. It was the first time that the Guild had done this show, and I always like working on new shows that we haven't performed before because it kind of puts everybody on equal footing, because none of the performers have ever performed it, the directors have never performed it, so everybody gets a chance to learn it from the get-go.
I'm gonna make this poverty disappear.
And we found out on the last day of music rehearsals that we were not going to be able to perform it. And that was the rehearsal where we actually go through every song in the show. And it was just kind of bittersweet because we were ready to let everybody in the show hear everything all at once. And then we get the news that we're not going to be able to perform it. So it was a letdown. It was a great cast. It was hard to cast because it was a difficult show. But we did cast it, and we had a great cast. I was just really disappointed that Charleston was not going to be able to see that great performance.
As artistic director and choreographer, I've always been fond of challenging musicals that we maybe felt we had to push a little harder to get it cast, to get the choreography, to get the stage effects. Musicals like Mary Poppins, A Chorus Line, Les Mis, Follies, Rent. But I know if I ask these guys, out of all the musicals they've conducted, they'll have a different list that stands out than I would have. And our audience have picked their own lists of largest attendees, and High School Musical tops our list of attendees. And we certainly had great audiences for Mamma Mia, Fiddler on the Roof, and Beauty and the Beast, plus a few others. Our group has only produced 3 musicals 5 times, and those are Fiddler, Guys and Dolls, and The Sound of Music. So they seem to be favorites of someone. Okay, well, let me put these guys on the spot and ask what stands out in their mind about the musicals that they have musically directed for the Light Opera Guild.
Okay, well, I can't narrow it down to 3, so I'll give you 8. Sister Act, The Color Purple, Ragtime, The Wiz, Spamalot, The Producers, and also 42nd Street. 42nd Street was in there because I got to be involved in that 3 times. The first time I was in the show, the second time I played in the orchestra, and the third time I got to conduct it, so I got to be really intimate with 42nd Street. But I love all of these shows. I would do them all again in a heartbeat.
I have a much shorter list because I've only conducted 4 shows, but of those, I would say The Little Mermaid was pretty special because it's my first show that I actually got to conduct the orchestra, and it was at the Clay Center, and there's really something special about performing a show like that and hearing the reaction of the kids in the audience and all that. And I love Disney anyway, so that was a special one. But really, I think my favorite experience of directing a show was Bright Star, a show that we did here at the Guild. And the thing about that one was not a lot of people had ever even heard of the show before we did it. And it's really interesting to kind of bring that to an audience who's never heard of the show before. Really well received. Again, I think we cast that one really well, and it was really kind of a different show. We had an on-stage sort of bluegrass ensemble, a lot different than a lot of shows that people see. So I think Bright Star was definitely my favorite directing experience.
Now, when I'm asked to give favorites, I always try to avoid that question because I've conducted so many musicals for the Guild over the years, and I've loved a lot of them. But if I had to pick three that really gave me a wonderful experience and a great something to really be memorable, I would have to choose probably Gypsy, the great Julie Stein, Stephen Sondheim musical, which has one of the greatest overtures ever written. And I'm very proud of Les Miserables, the work that I did on that, and the fabulous orchestra that I had, and the wonderful cast. And then I would say more into the modern area, the jazzy area, I really loved directing Chicago, the musical.
John, I know that we have done a production of Annie with the Light Opera Guild 4 separate times, and I believe you've been involved with all 4, which have been big crowd pleasers, whether they're at the Little Theater or the Clay Center. You played the role of Daddy Warbucks the first time we presented it, and I believe you conducted the other 3. Other than Annie, can you tell me what a musical needs to possess to pique your passion?
Well, I was never exposed much to operetta growing up. In my house growing up, it was musicals, and I love musical comedy. I love shows that have great music, but also have a great book, a funny book that will make the audience laugh. Shows like The Producers, shows like A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum is a hilarious slapstick script. And it's great for the actors, the performers, as well as the singers. But you run the gamut, the styles, the different styles. I don't have one that particularly appeals to me more than the other, but I do really love the musical comedy.
Okay, Bobby, I know you and I have worked on some cutting edge shows, some mischievous shows from the Full Monty down. But what does a musical have to possess to pique your passion? What style musicals do you prefer?
Comedies are pretty important to me, but I also like shows that have a lot of dance. If they're heavy on dance numbers, I really, really enjoy those. It really gives the orchestra a chance to shine because usually the dance numbers, you're not going to have a lot of vocal parts, so you're being entertained by the dancers on stage, and you can also enjoy the orchestra. So that is one thing that I really, really enjoy in shows. So if you give me a comedy with a bunch of big dance numbers, I'm happy.
David, I know we've worked on shows that are both fantasies, and then we've worked on some that are spontaneous with audience input. And we've worked on some classics, and I might add to everyone listening that we have done really well with classics, from the Oklahoma to the Sound of Music to others that we've done in the last few years. So we like bringing them back for young people to know what they are, but the majority of our shows have been newer classics or cutting edge or unknown productions in the last few years. What is your favorite style of musical theater? Do you have a favorite style?
I really like a wide variety. I love big shows at the Clay Center and the sort of medium-sized shows at the Civic Center. But I think shows that I've really connected with are the smaller, sort of intimate shows that we do here at the Guild Theater. And that, first show I ever directed was 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, which is just hilarious, and there's audience participation, and that's just a really funny one. But then, like I mentioned earlier, Bright Star is a really special show, really emotional. The everybody in the show is truly part of the ensemble, especially in our production. You have everybody really has their part that they do, whether it's moving things around on the stage, interacting with the orchestra on stage, things like that. And then, like Nina said, I have played for over 20 shows with the Guild. So one of my favorite accompanying experiences was the show The Bridges of Madison County, which was also performed here at the Guild Theater. And I just think that show is so special. Great music by Jason Robert Brown. Small orchestra, but really well orchestrated. And I just think there's something really neat about, you strip away all the big sets, all the hoopla and all that stuff, and you just have a really intimate show that has a lot of emotional depth that you can really, dive into those feelings of the show. And those are the shows I think really that I like the most.
I'd like to bring the president of the Light Opera Guild's Board of Directors into this conversation. Please meet Scott Jarrell. Scott, please describe how the group selects the shows it does each season.
So, as you know, show selection is often one of the questions we get asked the most here at the Light Opera Guild. And it's a tedious kind of thing that we go through. There are a lot of factors that we have to take into account whenever we're choosing shows. One of the main things that we have to think about is where the show will be performed. So usually at the beginning of the year we have dates for the Light Opera Guild Theater, we have dates for the Charleston Coliseum and Convention Center Little Theater, and we also have dates for the Clay Center. So those dates are set in place. So at that point, once we know the locations for our fall, our spring, our summer shows, then we can look and see what shows fit into those specific venues. We do get a lot of suggestions from the board. We get a lot of suggestions from a lot of the individuals that have been in the shows, and we also get them from just our general membership. A lot of people will kind of give us some suggestions, some shows that they would like to see us do. We do get some suggestions of shows that the rights aren't available. So you'll hear, Phantom of the Opera. That's always one of the main ones that we hear. And then some of your more popular shows today, like Hamilton. Those rights aren't going to be available for quite some time. So we look at the shows that are available, and we look at what we've done in years past, and try to see what we can maybe bring back. What shows we can do that are new, that are exciting, and then what we think we're going to be able to cast. So once we sort of have that whole picture together, then we as a board get together, and it can be a couple of meetings. It takes some time sometimes, but we sit down and we go through all of the options, and we vote on what we think is going to be the best season that it can be for the Light Opera Guild for that year.
Some of the shows that appeal to the audience are not necessarily bringing out people for auditions. It doesn't always go hand in hand. So there's just a wide variety of things that have to be considered before this. But now, Scott, with the necessitated cancellation of our Memphis production and our 2 summer shows, Paradise Park during Festival and Footloose in August, we hope we can still do ELF at the Clay Center in late October and early November, but there's no guarantees with this COVID-19. Can you give us any inclination? Are we going to move the productions that got canceled to another time slot, or is that a possibility? Any thoughts?
It's a really good question. It has been discussed. We are currently discussing that as a board. And again, we need to see basically where these shows are going to take place in 2021. We are very hopeful that we'll be able to produce ELF at the Clay Center this fall. And then once that is sort of decided, then we'll have a better picture and a better idea of what we can do moving forward. So no, we don't really have anything set in stone at this point, but that is a conversation that we're having.
Okay, back to our panel. Guys, I'm going to take this opportunity to let you tell us what you would like to see the Light Opera Guild do in the next couple of years. It can be a revival, it can be a new show. Probably shouldn't be something we've done in the last 7 years, but anything that you want to mention that you think the Light Opera Guild could handle.
Over the years now, Broadway, it's harder and harder to get some of these newer shows. I know that we we worked very hard to get Mamma Mia as well as Les Miserables when we did it. I would love to see us try to do a show like Young Frankenstein. I also, I don't think you have to wait 10 years to revive a show if it's an extremely popular show. A show like Annie, I think that you could do every 5 years because it is extremely popular with people, and people will come out for it. It's usually very successful when we do it.
A couple of the shows that the Light Opera Guild has done before that I would like to see possibly done in the next couple of years. Company, a great Sondheim show, great ensemble cast, Chorus Line, and since we're on such a good roll for Rodgers and Hammerstein line out South Pacific, I think it's one of their most beautiful scores that they wrote. And as for new shows, there's a couple new titles that are available, Something Rotten, Kinky Boots, Avenue Q, and then Once on This Island, I think is a great show.
Well, Memphis. We have to do it, and I would like to do it as soon as possible, because that way we would have a chance of having most, if not all, of the same cast that we had right now. So that is a definite. I would definitely like to do The Producers and Spamalot again. Those two are just classics for me, and they have everything that I love in musicals. And Sister Act, I would do that again in a heartbeat. So those are just some of my favorites. Yeah.
David, as musical director, conductor, I know you have responsibilities both to the cast and to the orchestra. So let's just concentrate on the responsibilities with the cast for a moment. Are you able to make adjustments to, like transposing to fit the voices of the cast? Do you feel that's an important thing to do? Do you feel you can take liberties with the written music, or it has to be as written? When you're working with a cast of singers, can you tell me, do you consider yourself a voice teacher doing this, or you are only blending them and education of sound has to come elsewhere?
You really have to know your cast and your cast's capabilities. I would consider at some point I'm kind of like a voice teacher. It depends on the abilities of the cast and the age of the cast. Like in The Sound of Music, we have kids who are 7, 8, 9 years old. So of course you have to kind of give them a little voice lesson kind of thing. But when you're working with people who are professional singers, at that point it's more like coaching than really teaching a voice lesson or something like that. As far as changing things in the score, legally, you're not really supposed to do that much. Sometimes we might add a little something here and there, like in The Sound of Music, for instance. Originally, when Rodgers and Hammerstein wrote it, the title song, The Sound of Music, was nice, but very kind of flat, and it wasn't the big showstopper it was in the movie with Julie Andrews, we'll say. So we wanted to kind of give it that sort of feeling. So we, added some slowdowns and some cello rondo some places, and then we added a key change at the end to really sort of drive it home and make it a bigger showstopper than what it was. So you can do small things like that sometimes to sort of kick up the music and make it more exciting for the audience.
Well, the balance is an issue most of the time. The body mics presents their own problems. We also have microphones in the orchestra, so our sound tech, sound engineer really has his hands full just about every show, because he has to pull all of that sound into a soundboard and give a good blend between the vocalist and the instrumentalist. But on top of that, you have to make sure that the vocalist, you don't have one person that overpowers everybody else. And the same thing in the orchestra. You have to make sure that the different sections of the orchestra blend with each other along with blending as a whole as the orchestra. So it's very involved in something that really becomes transparent to the audience, but it is something that does take a lot of work to get right.
John, I know this is an obvious question to you, but maybe not to listeners. Can you explain the responsibilities of the musical director-conductor?
Well, the main responsibility of the musical director is to make sure the performers know what they're doing vocally.
Everything's up to date in Kansas City. They run about as sure as they can go. In a lonely road. But when there's a moon.
And, you know, I think each one of the musical directors of the Light Opera Guild, we all have our own technique of doing things. We all have our way of motivating our cast. We know that you know, not being a professional theater where you can audition and audition and audition until you get the most perfect cast in the world. In community theater, you don't get that. But we work and work very hard to make our performers sound as good as they possibly can. And you know, as far as motivation, it doesn't take much, because most of these folks that come out for the Light Opera Guild love what they're doing, and they love performing. And as far as the orchestra goes, it's not difficult at all to motivate the orchestra. I think we have one of the finest orchestras around in any community theater. And as far as you know, as far as content goes, I'm not real crazy about changing a book, but I know that on Broadway they will transpose numbers all the time when a new person comes into a show, if the original song is not in the key that is really good for them. So I don't have any trouble with transposing music for the score.
I might mention that guild shows are cast by a panel that consists of the show's directors plus a couple of objective qualified individuals. Now, some of the productions don't require triple threats, and some of them do. Triple threats are those that sing, dance, and act. And on Broadway, there's tons of them. In Charleston, West Virginia, there's a handful. So these musical directors have their hands full when they have to teach some of the dancers to sing, and I likewise have my hands full teaching some of the singers to dance. But these guys all enjoy working with a diverse cast, and I would like them now to tell us what their inspiration is in doing a musical. What inspired them to work in music? Because they've all worked in the public school system, or Bobby worked as an adjunct professor at West Virginia State University. So what have been your major influences in a career in music, particularly musical theater?
This is going to sound so hokey, but you know, my actual inspiration for getting involved in music, and especially musical theater, was the Charleston Light Opera Guild itself. I was barely in junior high school when I saw an ad in the paper for the Light Opera Guild's production of The Music Man. And I went to my parents and I said, I've got to try out for this. Please let me audition for this. And of course, my family was, especially my mother, was very musical. And Dad said, well, sure, I'll take you down. I don't know if he thought I was going to get in it, but I did. And that was the beginning of everything. I mean, all through my high school years, I did several shows with the Light Opera Guild. Oliver, West Side Story, and it just carried over into college. I just said, I'm going to major in music. I was inspired by the conducting of Donald Riggio when he was the musical director of the Light Opera Guild, and I said, I want to be like him. And so that's what I did.
Basically done music my whole life. I started playing the piano when I was 6. When I was in middle school, I was in band. I played the trumpet. When I was in high school, I was in show choir and did some other singing things. Then I majored in music at Marshall. But I have to say, the thing that really inspired me to want to do music was musical theater. Like John said, I was inspired by the Light Opera Guild. The first musical I ever saw was 1993 production of Annie that the Light Opera Guild did, and I was 5 years old, and I didn't actually make it to Act 2 because I fell asleep during intermission, but I loved it, and it was just, I had seen the movie, but it's so different when you actually see it on stage. And then I continued to see musicals. I saw the national tour of The King and I at the Municipal Auditorium back when they used to have shows there, in Greece, which I like The King and I a lot more than Greece. But and Light Opera Guild shows, and really musical theater is really the thing that I feel the most comfortable in, and the thing that really brings me the most joy.
Well, I was a little bit of a late bloomer to music. I didn't start music really until 9th grade at Elkview Junior High School, and I had who you would now know, Leah Lewis. She was Leah Dahlmeyer at that time because she was just out of college. So I decided in 9th grade that I wanted to be in the marching band, and so I went to Leah and asked her if I could be in the band, and she said sure. And she said, what do you want to play? And I said, well, my mom played sax, so I guess I'll play sax too. So she said fine, and stuck a sax in my hand, and off I went. And so I did pretty well on it, and after I went to high school at Herbert Hoover, I started learning other instruments, and by the time I got to my senior year, I was playing sax and oboe and flute and clarinet and everything. So I thought, well, my senior year in high school, I had some friends that had performed with the Light Opera Guild, so I decided that I wanted to play in the orchestra, just to give that a try before I went off to college. And that was my first introduction to Nina and John. And it was such a good experience that when I would come home in the summers, I would play in the orchestra, and then once my college days were over, I continued to play in the orchestra, and then eventually became a conductor. So that's a brief synopsis of my road to musical theater.
Obviously, anyone who spends as much time as our board of directors does working with the Light Opera Guild, managing the group, and particularly the board president, and also our building takes a great deal of time to keep preserved. They have to have a love of musical theater above just being involved with the group. So Scott, I want to ask you, as president of the Light Opera Guild, what were your major influences in wanting to be involved with the Guild?
So, I mean, much like, our panelists, I have always had a love of music. I was always the kid that would listen to, musical theater in my bedroom, just on repeat. Some of my favorites that I always listened to, Phantom of the Opera was my #1 favorite. I loved Jekyll and Hyde. So, just that type of music is what really, just the passion and the feeling that you get listening to some of those songs is what really draws me to musical theater. And actually, the very first show that I auditioned for the Light Opera Guild, was Seussical, and I did not get cast. And so the next show that I actually was able to perform in was Ragtime, and that was 2007. That was my very first show with the Light Opera Guild, and that experience had me hooked right from the beginning. And I knew that it was something that I wanted to do more of as much as possible. Being here in the building, being with these individuals, and the years that they've had to really perfect what the Light Opera Guild stands for, that is what has excited me. That's what makes me just so honored to be part of the board of directors and be part of this organization. And it's something that as long as I'm here and as long as it's standing, I will always come and support, audition, and volunteer as much as I possibly can.
Yes, in closing, we're regretful that we can't introduce a new production. It would have been Paradise Park for Festival, but we are so pleased that we could do a panel and remain part of this collaborative festival that celebrates the arts. Arts are so important to our lives. They brighten our days, they brighten our nights, and they often change us. So hopefully we'll see you with Elf and Broadway at Home in the fall. Thank you to our panel, John Marshall, David Patrick, Bobby Hodges Jr., and Board President Scott Jarrell, plus Rudy Arrowwood, who is our filmmaker from Kingmaker Marketing Agency.
All right. Well, we are back here with Scott Jarrell, Board President of the Charleston Light Opera Guild, and Nina Denton-Pasinetti, Artistic Director. Ready for your questions and answers. I've got the feed pulled up here, but we had some questions come in during the panel that I want to get started and ask you guys about. But I do want to ask quickly, you mentioned that when you hear from people about what kind of shows the general public wants the Light Opera Guild to produce, the main inhibitor sometimes is rights for this. So talk a little bit more about that. Some behind the scenes things that the general public may not know what goes into the production of a Light Opera Guild, of a show or a season.
Okay, I'll take it. Wicked is another show that we don't get rights for right away. It's been on Broadway for some time and we'd love to do it. But often shows that, like The Sound of Music that we produced early in 2020, was not available to us a couple of years ago. And I can also remember Oklahoma not being available the last time we searched for it. So sometimes it's a show that is like 60 years old because it's on a national tour, and the tour may come near you. Near us may mean Columbus, Ohio, but it still may be pulled from our availability. So Scott, you want to say anything else on all that about the royalty rights?
Yeah, I think, a lot of times I think people just have this understanding that, we can just choose any show that we want to do, go out and get it, and then produce it. And that's just, we wish it was that easy, but it's totally not the case. Like I said before, there are a lot of factors that go into it. But as far as the rights are concerned, like Nina just spoke to, if there is a show that we would like to do, but it is being done close to us in that given time frame, or even close to it, then we just won't get those rights. And so sometimes it is trial and error with some of the shows that we're really wanting to put on for the public. And so we may, go for the rights for a certain show, but we may have 2 or 3 backups ready in case it comes back that those rights aren't available. So it is sort of a back and forth that we have to play.
I was going to say, years ago, we used to list a backup for a show, and people played games with us. They would say, oh, we're not going to come audition for the one that's listed because we want to do the backup show. So we don't do that anymore, Nope. And that was back in the days where the general membership in a summer meeting chose the shows for the year. And when I say they chose them in the summer, one would be produced in the fall. So we're a little further out than then now with choosing our shows. And also budgets also provide some constraints in producing certain productions. And it all depends on where you're presenting the show. Obviously, if we present something of the quality of The Little Mermaid or Mary Poppins, and those are semi-new to us, these Disney-like shows, they have a larger budget, and we require the cooperation and the coordination of doing it with the Clay Center as a co-production, and they're a little less expensive to do at the Civic Center. The royalties are a little less because there's fewer seats, but in our own building, of course, which you can't do a large show like that in our building, it's an intimate space, but the budgets for those shows are certainly a lot smaller than those that run over sometimes $100,000 to produce a musical.
Mm-hmm.
So you just mentioned, Nina, that it depends on how many people are in the audience. I don't know if that's something that a lot of people may not be aware of. It's how many people consume the content determines how much money you owe the royalty company.
Right, it does. The size of the hall that you're presenting it in, definitely. And not only that,
The number of performances.
Time to produce the production also
Right.
determined.
Yeah.
And then you have all the budgetary things like costumes, sets, contract fees. And when we move into the Clay Center, a lot of times the lights are already hung, you know, but when we go to the Civic Center, we have to take our lights and hang them ourselves and take our soundboard in, our light board in. The same thing within our theater. Things move around. And that's an expense too. So I think there's underlying expenses no one realizes.
Right.
We don't want them to come to a show and be burdened by all of that knowledge. We want them just to sit back and enjoy the production or be moved by the production.
Right.
So on average, would you say out of the shows that are produced in a year for the Light Opera Guild or just in general, does the Light Opera Guild own any costumes or anything like that? Or do you purchase all of those things along with the rights to be able to produce a show? Or does it vary show by show?
The rights
I feel like it varies.
It varies.
It varies show by show. Like, so for Bright Star, you know, some of the shows that we're able to produce in the Light Opera Guild Theater, a lot of times we do have a costume room. It is very, I mean, Nina somehow knows where every single costume is in that costume room. And so, you know, for some of the smaller shows that we have, we're able to go through that room and piece together, you know, the costumes that we have for that show. But for some of these other shows, you know, specifically, we've talked about Mary Poppins. You look at the costumes for Les Mis. I mean, some of these larger cast sizes, really intricate costumes that you have, and those are typically purchased or rented from a company. Nina can speak a little bit more to that.
Right, and sometimes when you're going into a large show, rental costumes aren't available, you know, and you have to round them up yourself. And I have to give a nod to the people that help do that. I have to nod my husband, Tom Pasinetti, as technical director, because he arranges a lot of not only sets, but costumes and putting them in the theaters that we go to, plus Pam Higgs, who is over our costuming now. And she does this as a volunteer, I might add. And also for sound, because it was mentioned in the panel discussion, Mike Ramsey, who's been doing our sound engineering for quite some time. So they're all part of this package to make this work.
So one of the questions that we got, because the musical directors all answered this question, but people want to hear from the two of you as well. What are some of your top shows? What are your favorites, either that you've been in, or what would you like to see come to the Light Opera Guild as well? So that's kind of twofold question there.
Go ahead, Scott.
We'll get me out of the way, because I know that's mainly geared towards Nina. You know, for me personally, I really like, what I found is that I really love those smaller type shows. So Bright Star and Bridges of Madison County probably are my two favorites that I've been able to be a part of. And it's just that small, intimate setting at the Light Opera Guild Theater. It's the subject matter, being able to really, you know, kind of dive in to the acting and the emotion, along with just absolutely gorgeous music. But then also Mary Poppins. I absolutely loved doing Mary Poppins. That was the first time that I had the chance to perform in the Clay Center. And just walking out on that stage when we were doing Move In, it's amazing to stand there and just kind of look at the auditorium. But everything all together, when it came together for that show, and having the audiences that we did, having the reactions that we did, that was a special one for me as well. But I've really loved all of the shows that I've had the chance to do. I think each and every one of them, there's something special that I've been able to take away from it. But I would definitely think that Bright Star and Bridges kind of top my list.
Well, your hair in Bridges definitely.
I mean, it doesn't get much better than that hair in Bridges of
Oh,
Madison.
hair.
I have never been more excited to get rid of a costume in my whole entire life.
I had forgotten exactly what that wig looked like, so when it popped up in the panel discussion, I was very glad that everyone can revisit that.
So am I.
He looked very, what is the word, rugged, which he pulled it off. I'll answer some of mine too. Now, I like the intimate shows, and I loved every one he was talking about, and that I think David named a lot of the intimate shows. They're fun, but I also love the big explosive things so that we can show our true ability to produce something on the scale of Les Mis or Beauty and the Beast, or the first show we ever did at the Clay Center. We had, I think, a 62-member cast, and it was The Music Man. And of course, it's supposed to be back on Broadway this fall. I have a feeling it won't be this fall, with a great cast. And it's another show that would be fun to revisit and do for the Light Opera Guild if we were going to do a revival. But there are other shows we haven't done yet. I mean, ones that we don't have the rights to certainly be fun. And I like shows like the Anything Goes type shows. So I've always kind of wanted to do nice work if you can get it, but I don't know if I want to do it in the big explosive style because it's a Gershwin show and it's not as well known. So we might do better in a smaller setting to sell it. Certainly Something Rotten, that's a new show available to us. It would be wonderful to produce. Finding Neverland, which probably will be released soon. And then I like the little ones like Bonnie and Clyde and falsettos that we've never done. And hey, I'm game for a chorus line as many times as people want to do it. It's been done in our building. It's been done at the Culture Center. It has been done at the Civic Center a couple of times. And it is all dependent upon the actors, and it doesn't have to have a big fantastic set. And hey, we still have the costumes on that. But some of these newer shows that are just coming out and aren't even up for Tonys this year, like The Girl from the North Country, Bob Dylan's music, that would be a wonderful thing to do in our space. And I love Jagged Little Pills, and those are kind of offbeat type shows. And anything Sondheim does, I'm game for, because I can still remember seeing Into the Woods and coming to the realization that, hey, it's not a fairy tale, it's about real life. And I like anything that moves you like that. What was the one you were in that we did with 6 people at the Civic Center, Scott?
Next to Normal.
Next to Normal, one of my favorite experiences of doing theater. But then I'm also game for, Thoroughly Modern Millie or Drowsy Chaperone. But there are some out there we haven't done, and there are some revivals. We didn't mention some of the revivals we've done recently that went over well. We did a Lerner and Lowe production that was really positively received, and there's still The King and I, that's a Rodgers and Hammerstein, that we haven't done in years. And I'm watching something on television that takes place, it's an old series I'm watching on Netflix that takes place in Scotland, and I thought, wow, there's a Scottish show that we haven't done, Brigadoon, in decades, and it has beautiful music. So Man of La Mancha, what a wonderful show to bring back, and we've never done Sweeney Todd.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
That's kind of surprising to me. I'm going to skip around on the questions a bit just because we're on the topic here. We've got a question. Would you like to do operetta or any Gilbert and Sullivan operettas?
Well, we came back during our 60th anniversary when Tim Whitener was our president, and we had such a huge 50th anniversary with Follies and a big explosive party like we did for our 70th, that instead we redid the first show the Light Opera Guild ever did, which was the royalty-free HMS Pinafore. And it was so successful in our building that we had wonderful talent for that, people who love operetta. So then the next year, we followed it up with the Pirates of Penzance. So we haven't revisited, but yes, we love that. We love all forms of musical theater.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of musical theater, so someone's also asked, would would the Light Opera Guild ever consider doing something non-musical that's appeared on Broadway?
We're the only organization exclusively devoted to musicals. So we don't think that at this point, we've been asked to do that through different organizations for decades, and it's never happened. So I don't think so. I don't know, Scott. It's just not in our discussion at all to do that.
Right.
Okay, so would we, someone's asking, would the Light Opera Guild ever consider doing Hairspray again?
I think Hairspray, I mean, that's been one that has been, discussed recently. I've definitely heard people bringing that up. So I think along with the list that Nina's discussed, I think that is one that's always in the mix in some way, shape, or form as in our discussions. So, I mean, I would love to see us do that again sometime.
Yeah,
Well, we haven't mentioned Dreamgirls. I should have mentioned it as one of the challenging shows that I was so thankful we did, because it was a hard one, and we've done it twice now. So we've been very fortunate in these African American produced musicals to have great talent come out for them. And then like Memphis that we were just about, it was such a mix of talent. As Bobby said, we should consider it we just don't know what our season will be or our time or where we'll be.
Right.
We're in limbo right now.
Yeah. So would Charleston Light Opera Guild ever build their own sets instead of renting? That's a question that we were asked. That's quite a monumental undertaking.
We have built our own sets. Kiss Me, Kiss Me, we did. We built our own sets. These productions we have in our own building, they're definitely not rentals in any which way, but there have been many shows for years, Follies that we did, The King and I the last time we did. Yeah, numbers of shows. We've been on a trend recently of renting sets because they're so glorious, and volunteer talent to do everything stands in the way of doing everything at home, you know?
Yeah.
We're fortunate to have our seamstresses volunteering their talent to either stitch, make, or put together costumes from a company. You know, we're fortunate on that.
So I know it likely varies depending on the size of the production, but I mean, the scope of volunteers that are required to pull off just a single Light Opera Guild production. Talk a little bit about just the sheer number of people that are involved in making something like that happen that you don't see on the stage.
That's one of the things that I love probably most about our organization is the number of people that we have committed to volunteering in any which way. And it's not so much that it's people that are separate that haven't acted or anything like that. I mean, it's people from our casts that may not be in that current production that are coming back to help out. But then also just others from the community that come together. So we have obviously people that are helping in the box office. So when you're, calling to purchase your tickets or when you show up the day of the show, those individuals there are obviously volunteering to help get you the tickets and get you, in the auditorium as quickly as possible. But then we have people backstage that are obviously our tech crew, our stage managers, but then also those that are helping the cast get dressed for their different costume changes that they may have within the performance. So, there are some shows, I know that Ragtime, there were people that had 13 to 14 costume changes throughout that entire show. And so each person would need probably their own specific dresser that would know, when they need to change into this costume, where this costume needs to be set up. So it's a quick change. And those individuals, a lot of our shows would not be able to happen if we didn't have people like that backstage to help us out as performers as we're going along. But then, as Nina's also talked about, the seamstresses, they come to a lot of our,
prop people.
And the props. Yeah. I mean, and they're there, the props and the seamstresses, they're there, throughout Tech Week. They're there with us at the performances. So if anything happens, they can help with the costumes. But then the props, those ladies, they guard that prop table like nothing else I've ever seen. So if you grab the wrong prop, they're going to let you know that you grabbed the wrong prop and put it back down. So, I mean, they know what they're doing. It's it's a great group of individuals that really have taken the time, love this organization just as much as we do, and will do whatever is needed. And then a lot of our board of directors, you know, that's one of the things that we all kind of take pride in, is that we're there to help as much as possible as well. We're not just making decisions and then you never see us. You know, we're working backstage. We're helping out with the box office. If it's a cleaning day at the Guild, if we're having a show in our theater, you know, there are multiple cleaning days to take that happen so we can get the building ready for everybody. So it's a lot of people, a lot of hands on deck. And we're always looking for volunteers. So if you are interested in volunteering, please reach out and let us know, and we will put you to work.
That was going to be my next plug, was how does someone get in touch if they want to volunteer with the Light Opera Guild?
They go to
So
our
we do have,
page, right?
yeah, they can, we have on our website, I believe we have where you can send us like an email, and you can just let us know if you're interested in volunteering. We have a volunteer coordinator on our board that will reach out, and she'll take care of, you know, getting you started and getting you placed somewhere.
Wonderful. Well, we did have another question about a potential show. Someone wants to know if Rocky Horror Picture Show would ever be on the table. But we have another question that's interesting. Would you ever consider allowing a film crew to film the making of Light Opera Guild musical from start to finish with lots of behind the scenes?
Not unless royalties permitted it. Right now, royalties does not give you that ability. You know, some of the royalty companies are sending out streaming things. Just in the last 2 days, you know, certain musicals you could do as a streaming thing, you know, rather during this time of COVID-19 is what it's about, you know, so you can continue doing things. Of course, you don't share in that feedback with the audience when it's live, because
Right.
it's called live theater for a reason. It's a give and take, and a much better experience, you know, than a film that we would make of it. But we have memorabilia things for our cast, which are never supposed to be shown anywhere but in their own living room, you know, to themselves. Right. But we can't do that.
Yeah, and more recently than not, Rudy Arrowwood with the Kingmaker Marketing Agency, she has really taken charge of our social media and a lot of our marketing. And so for a lot of our recent shows, you may have seen on our Facebook pages some behind the scenes kind of clips from our rehearsals, some interviews of cast members. So she is working on doing a lot more of that behind the scenes type stuff to give people a fuller picture of what our process looks like, what a typical rehearsal might look like, that sort of thing. But as far as going all the way through, you know, and doing the show and recording all that, we just can't do that.
Yeah, if we were able to show one of the musicals we've done from a video that's near professional, we would have done it rather than this panel for festival, but it is not within our ability to do that due to royalty constraints.
Yeah.
So the audience wants to know, Nina, how did you become involved and I believe with the Light Opera Guild in general, and then there's a bit of a step back from there. So the musical directors were asked what their introduction to musical theater was. So can you speak to your experience and how you got started?
Mine's different than those three musical directors. I can tell you, I was a dance student from the age of 5 up, and loved everything dance. And my mother had been a singer, but she immediately told me not to sing, and actually stuck me behind the piano to learn to play the piano, which I did. And not as well, I couldn't play it without music, which she could do. So I didn't have that gift that she had. But even though she was a solo singer and people told me how wonderful she was, she would never sing for me. So I never heard her sing. But it was through dance, everything that grew from me. But the movie musicals are what piqued my interest and made me want to do musicals. I love them. I watched them all, and I expect it was my father that took me to them, because my mother would often stay home with my grandmother, who wasn't in good health, and he would take me to all these wonderful movie musicals, and I've always said they were wonderful. Then my my high school dance teacher, Helen Schrader, kind of intrigued me, would I like to go into this professionally? And I thought maybe since she was asking me that, she thought maybe I could. She connected me with Nat Dano, who was the choreographer for the Light Opera Guild. So I did go to school in the area at East Bank High. And when I was in college, my early years, I was in one production, Annie, Get Your Gun. And unfortunately, I was in a car wreck during that production and thought I wouldn't get to be on the stage opening night, but I made it. I just didn't get to go through the tech week when everybody was getting criticized. I liked all the critical stuff, but I did make it through. Then I wasn't around here for a while. I went away. When I came back, I worked with some other theater companies in the area, taught at GW High School, and immediately started working on musicals at George Washington High School with Mary Kay Stroom, choreographing those. Eventually took over them and worked with Tom Murphy finally at the Light Opera Guild, because Light Opera Guild was a group that did musicals consecutively. Canal Players and State did them occasionally. So I wanted to be with the Light Opera Guild. So it just was a little path of growth, and I kind of have been stuck there since the early 70s, although John Marshall and I did leave. It's a period of the 80s and worked in professional summer stock out of town for a while and returned. But for 12 years, I was mainly the choreographer. And then after that, for the last 37 years, I've been artistic director, which means I've directed and choreographed shows.
A wonderful experience. And Charleston's been very fortunate to have you in that role, Nina. I
Sure some
truly.
people are ready to see me not in that role. They're, oh, move on, let somebody else do this, but we'll see.
Oh, Nina. So I just saw this pop up too. Someone wants to know when you're going to write a book.
Well, when I heard Larry Gross and Danny Boyd had done another musical while they were COVID, I thought, why am I cleaning out shelves? Why am I not doing something else? Listen, my ability to write a book, I don't know about that. One of our members has written a book that he mailed me recently, a memoir. So I guess it is a possibility, but I don't know who would want to read it, you know? I mean,
I think there are a lot of people that would want to read it, and you could just dictate. We'll find someone else to type it for you.
I probably did my limit by putting together that commemorative 32-page soft-bound book for the Light Opera Guild's 70th anniversary. That getting that produced with pictures was a challenge, you know.
It was fascinating, though. I mean, I learned a lot about the Light Opera Guild productions. Some fun facts that you may not otherwise, be aware of, like what is the largest size cast that has ever been on stage for a Light Opera Guild production. Correct me if I'm wrong, but was that Les Mis?
Well, you know what? I'm not so certain that I know the largest, because I think sometime prior to me doing anything with the Guild, there were so many large casts, and they were all based on singing. We are a musical-based group, and with the newer musicals, you also have to have actors. You can't just have musicians that sing well and have degrees in music, because some of these people could work professionally. Some of them have worked professionally, but not every. We're amazed at the talent that we receive in Little Charleston, West Virginia, and our group is something to be really proud of for our state, you know, because people who move away from here don't find a similar group that they can be part of, because professional theater is in their area, and they don't find a community theater that's up to what they consider their standards. So.
We're very fortunate. I think Charleston is a tremendous arts community, but it's thanks in part to organizations like the Light Opera Guild that's been around for 70 years, producing really quality shows and setting a very high standard for things that the general public and residents and visitors alike can come in and enjoy. So Nina and Scott, has there been a show that you never thought that Clog would do, but had a really great surprise turnout, like that you were very pleased at how well it was selling?
It's a good question.
Hair. I never thought we would do hair, and we followed it the year after Rent, and people really like to do that show. You know, that amazed me. I don't think I thought we'd ever do the full Monty, but
Yeah, that's good. That's a good call.
What about you, Scott? And probably the ability to do the one we did with 6 people at the Civic Center was an amazing thing, to be able to do it in true form, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I really have an answer for that question. I feel like, I don't know. I don't know if it's the history of the Guild, or, you know, being in the audience as much as I have and seeing these productions, that I just don't know if there's anything in my mind that is really like off limits for us to do. I don't think that there's something that I am shocked about if we decide to produce the show. So I don't know if I really have an answer for that, but yeah, good job, Nina. That was good. That's a good answer.
This Little Whorehouse of Texas, when we did that show, I suppose it's the title, to be honest. We actually, on opening night, had a hazard called in, and we couldn't start the show for a couple of hours because it was like there would be a bomb or something in the Civic Center. And I know everyone wasn't in favor of doing that show. I think the title, and going back years before that, people were a little questionable about doing the show Gypsy because of Gypsy Rose Lee being a stripper. Of course, it's a wonderful show, a wonderful written show and musical show, and we've done it several times, so people are way over that now. So
yeah,
we grow.
Yeah.
And Rocky Horror has been mentioned a couple of times, and I believe back when Rex Roberts was our president, he really wanted to see that done. Rex passed away during his presidency, but I haven't heard it in recent years. People haven't mentioned it.
Someone wants to know if you believe in the ghost in the costume room.
If the ghost can find a space in our costume room, then more power to it. I mean, I
don't believe in the ghost, but I can tell you I rehearsed one night with 3 gals for Gypsy. They were the 3 strippers. And they're funny. They're funny characters. They're not like strippers. They're dressed funny. And one of them was kind of psychic and saw a person in the balcony of our little building that we were over on the west side then. And by the time we finished, all of us saw it, you know, and we all went out of the building. We were so scared.
Well, based on Scott's face, I don't know if he's ever going to go back in the Guild Theater.
That's usually where I like to sit in the Guild Theater, but not now.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
I think your comment about having to delay the start of a show maybe spurred this question. But during a live production, has there ever been a catastrophe that happened that sticks out in your mind that you've either had to pause the show, restart, or anything like that?
Yes. Showboat in the 90s, mid-90s. Yes, our final dress rehearsal, something happened with one of the sets, and these, hey, we built our sets, and Showboat's a huge show. And a set struck something that caused a line to break with water that took over the stage, took over the costumes, took over the auditorium. We had to carry everything out into the parking lot, try to get it off. So we got through maybe the first act. That's one of the catastrophes. And the next night, with a beautiful opening, everything went as designed. The first show we did at the Clay Center, that was at the Civic Center. The first show we did at the Clay Center, as I said, was The Music Man. And we never got through the whole show before opening night because there was a train that separated on stage, and we had so many cast members, and we were the first community group to do a production in there, and it was before the Clay Center truly caught on, and with people going to it as they do now. when it's back and available to us to use. So that was nerve-wracking. And the other one was Peter Pan at the Civic Center. And one of our, I think it was Terry Marshall, dear late Terry Marshall, pulled something wrong in one of the pulls and caused another accident. And I can remember we had to shut down at a rehearsal, and we were like trepidatious, would we get through this? And that not only was that trepidatious, it was the fact that we had a different stage manager for each of the 3 weekends of the show. We had Brill for one, we had Denton-Pasinetti for one, and we had Rick Brown for one, and each of them very competent, but the changeover from the 3 acts in that show were tremendous. And not and that one break with the line coming down at the wrong time by Terry Marshall, who was worked at the newspaper and a wonderful thespian. But anyway, he had to live that down with his friends for years.
So talking a little bit about tech, what is the longest tech night that you've ever had for a show?
I'm pretty good now, but back in my high school teaching days, I would keep those people after midnight sometimes. And I'm pretty good about not doing that. And I don't know what changed in my mind. Of course, when I did the high school shows, these weren't the guild shows, but certainly the guild people were working on them, from the lighting designer to Tom Murphy down. But we didn't have the luxury of being in there very long to rehearse, like maybe the guild has 4 days, which 4 days is nothing, but it may seem like a luxury to people who have 2 days. Okay. Right. So we have rehearsed up to midnight almost for every show that we do tech for. That's just happens because you may appear at 5:30 to be body mic'd, which takes a long time to get hair and makeup. Ted Brightwell has done hair and makeup for years. We cannot underestimate his donation to the community theater and to other things within the community of Charleston. So, so it takes a couple of hours to prepare to do the show. So then if you are waiting to have your newspaper come take photos or your television station come advertise, that delays your start again. So you might not get started after arriving at 5:30 till 8:30 on Tech Week.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, Tech Week is a beast in and of itself. But I think for me, probably the first show that I was in, 2007 in Ragtime, that was a beast of a Tech Week. And a lot of people don't realize, we rehearse obviously at the Light Opera Guild, which is, a smaller stage. So when you make it to the Civic Center or you make it to the Clay Center, even though you have everything down and you've got all the choreography down and where, the blocking for each scene, you basically have to reblock to space out on that stage and make sure you're filling the stage. And so, that definitely, delays because you're just stopping and starting, especially those first couple of nights. The Monday and Tuesday of Tech Week are typically when you're really going through scene by scene and just making sure that everything is fitting on the stage, that you're, working on things that need to be worked on, that sort of thing. So, I've definitely done shows where, that Thursday night, that final night of Tech Week is the first night that you've made it through the full show, for that week. But, with what she said with the microphones, and then, you usually don't even include costumes into Tech Week until typically Wednesday, Thursday, something like that. So there are a lot of factors that go into it, but Tech Week, yeah, for sure. It's a thing where you leave the house and you just say, I'll see you when I get back. You just don't know.
No timeline there.
No timeline.
And someone is recalling a fire drill during a Dolly school show when we were talking about
like school shows, yes.
Talking about things that
happened during Music Man's. Hello Dolly, I believe it was. Hello Dolly. I remember us all having to rush out of the theater and wait to rush back in, and then you stand that the buses are there to pick up the school children before the production is over, which is. And we love doing those school shows. When we did Les Mis, our most satisfying audience was the school audience who really got it. And maybe I'm talking about the wrong show. It wasn't Les Mis. It was Ragtime. When we did Ragtime, do you remember that all? Because you were in Ragtime, Scott. That school audience, and I think they were upper grades, they got it, and they were so respectful. It just made the whole production worthwhile, and that's a beast of a show to do.
Yeah.
So what about, has the Light Opera Guild ever considered doing some type of annual Christmas show?
We did Cultural Center Christmas shows. We did 2 Christmas stories. We did The Miracle on 34th Street. And then prior to that, in our own building, we did a Christmas show. And I'm trying to think of the name of it. It'll come to me in a moment, but I know Deborah and Roger Lucas starred in it. And we put some Christmas carols in front of it. It depends on when our fall show is mounted. If we do a fall show at the Clay Center, it has typically been late October, early November. If we do it at the Civic Center, it runs 3 weekends in November, which doesn't give you much time to do the Christmas show if we're doing it at the Civic Center. Otherwise, it does. So that's the differences, you know.
Yeah. And the Christmas shows have always done well. I mean, I think it's, for us, we love doing them because it's just a great way for families to come together to see the Christmas show, but then also to maybe get introduced to the Light Opera Guild if they've never seen one of our productions before. So, you know, I feel like that's typically part of our conversation as well whenever we're putting a show season together, is if that is a possibility or not. So.
All right. So what, to both of you, what would you say, this might be a very difficult question, what would you say is your favorite single number from a show?
Number?
Number. So I suppose in combo, if you've ever loved like the choreography and the music from.
Oh, sure. That's a hard one to just narrow it down to one. I'll say 1 from a chorus line, and that'll get me off the hook. I'll say. I'm going to bring a light up. I'm in the darkness here, I see.
I think actually for me, it would probably be Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious from Mary Poppins. And I really think the song itself is fun, but I think doing the choreography like we did it, and I think anybody that was in that number would probably agree, you know, learning those letters and doing the precise choreography for that number made it worth it. And to go back and watch that, it looks really good. And I mean, I think that's probably one that I'm most proud of, for sure.
That was a tough number, you know. And that's a show that comes with requirements that you have to reproduce certain numbers in certain manners. There's only been a couple of shows come with requirements. Man of La Mancha has certain choreographic requirements. That show, Mary Poppins, has them. The producers have certain choreographic requirements. All the others, you are free to do whatever you want. You know, you don't have any guidebook at all. I've traveled to Broadway. It's another incentive of doing this stuff for years, since the late 60s. And I've taken groups of kids during my high school teaching days that were dance students, not only from the school, George Washington High School, where I taught, but also from some other schools. And we would see just 5 or 6 shows in a weekend, you know, or I guess it was usually a Thanksgiving period, so it was more than a weekend. So, you know, I'm just like, go to shows. Sometimes I'm so tired by the last show, I don't thoroughly enjoy it. Once I saw George M., which has been one of my favorite shows and was a wonderful production at GW High when we did it. And I was so tired when we got to the final day. I was about asleep watching it on Broadway. And I miss Broadway right now.
I was going to ask, you know, Nina, you've talked about how you make trips up to New York, and when Broadway opens back up, what are some shows that you guys are very excited to see, assuming that they go into production?
I've always, you know, been listening to the music from Moulin Rouge. I really want to see that. I think that would be really interesting to see. And then I would like to see Jagged Little Pill, as she has discussed before. I think I would like that show a lot.
You would. I was lucky enough to go in February of this year to Broadway, so I saw a lot of the new shows, but I didn't get to see Tina. I went to see the Temptations show instead. Ain't Too Proud, I think. And my husband did go to see it and loved it. And I don't know if all this will come back around or not. I did get to see Tootsie, but I haven't seen Mrs. Doubtfire, which was slated to be done. And there were some others. Flying Over Sunset was slated to be done. Of course, the level of the performers in The Music Man makes me want to see that revival.
Yeah.
But you know, I just like them all, big and small, like them all. But and I did see the one you said you wanted to see, Scott, and it's an explosion of.
What, Moulin Rouge?
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, an explosive show.
Yeah.
So I've been fortunate to go once this year because I don't think I'll be back the remainder.
So moving back to the Guild, we've got a couple more questions, and then I've got one or two of my own to ask. Does the Light Opera Guild cast understudies?
No, I mean, as far as since I've been involved with them, no, I haven't seen any understudies, but she had a long sigh, so I'm going to let her take the rest of this question.
Well, listen, it's not like we haven't ever cast understudies, and sometimes two people have even been cast the same role, but I'm going back decades. Recently, that hasn't happened. You know, we've been very fortunate to have people mostly perform and not have illnesses, but we just lost one of our charter members, Jenny Melton, and she once had to walk on stage with a script and do a part. Now, this was before I was even involved with the Guild, but I saw the production, and it was in The Sound of Music. She had to walk on and do the role with book in hand, and had never rehearsed it because something happened to the lady doing that second female lead. But as far as other things that have happened, when we did High School Musical, which we sold 1,400 tickets on an average for our 6 shows at the Clay Center, which is wonderful. We lost a cast member on Tech Week that really didn't play by the rules. And I had to have my assistant, Paul Shannon, who felt he looked a little older than the high school student, go on in that place. And I also remember someone showing up particularly late for the whiz, and someone dressed to go on in the place. And it would have been a strange looking person going on again. It was for someone who showed up right at the nick of time. So, but we have people that probably are equipped to walk on with a script and make it work, but are they cast as an understudy? Not in recent times. Often anyone who comes in and we really think need to be in the show, they have a function in the show, and if they're not in those locations, then we have problems. I do remember Tony Pilato once learning the choreography Gypsy for a replacement cast member who had a funeral out of town, and the person really had to go to that funeral, and she learned it for that one weekend for Beth Bowden, I remember, and it worked out beautifully. And I remember Malia Haynes Brotherton learning something to go on for one show in the same manner for someone that had some unavoidable death in a family, you know, but it's been very infrequent. And if you can't be available for all performances, you're not cast. So just know that. We don't encourage that. Okay.
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear. Even got close to the camera to say that.
Oh my goodness. So let me make sure I'm getting everything from the feed. Okay, so here's a question. If someone wants to audition for a guild show coming up, what are some things that they can be doing right now to prepare themselves for that?
I think for me personally, whenever I look at auditioning for a show, I try to learn as much about the show as I possibly can to really understand what the show's about. Usually we always have our season on our website. So if they would go to our website and click on the show, then there will be a page that pops up that gives them some background information, but then it will also show all the available roles in the show, give a little background on each character, maybe talking about age. If it's a singing role, then if it's, tenor, bass, alto, soprano, what they can really expect. And then, I just listen to the music. Really try to get as good a grasp about the show as they possibly can. And usually the auditions are listed on that page on the website. So you'll see what day and time we will be having, the singing auditions, reading auditions. If there is dancing involved, then there will be information there for the dance auditions as well. And then they'll just they'll come in to the guild that night for the auditions. They'll sing. Sometimes we have the singing, the reading, and the dancing all on separate nights. So it may just be they come in, they sing the piece that they've selected to sing, and then that's all. Sometimes we'll do the singing and the reading together. So it just, we put as much information on our website as we possibly can to make that easier for people that haven't auditioned with us before.
I would say that music is very important in auditioning because we are a musical theater, and therefore audiences aren't too forgiving if the character who's supposed to be the main singer can't really sing. Now that doesn't mean that some actors who sort of sing haven't been cast in certain ways, because some things are dependent upon truly the acting ability. It might be comedic and it works. They aren't expected to be a lyrical singer, a trained singer, operatic quality or whatever, or a modern singer. But if you know what the role is, and it's so easy today to know what the roles are because everything's on that daggone YouTube, right? Years ago, you came in and you had to use your own brain set to figure out what it was. But now people go and copy, and I don't persuade them to copy, but at least get an idea of what it is. And it doesn't hurt to dress for the audition, and I'm saying dress. So if you were someone we would never believe doing this crazy role, then persuade us that you could by the way you come in and audition and look. I've seen somebody who's very elegant and modelly come in and dress in a crazy way and get this comedic role, frumpy role that you would never expect they could do, and they can do it. But you kind of have to show the committee you can,
Yeah.
Preparation.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great suggestion. So what, if people want to learn more about the Light Opera Guild, I know you mentioned to go onto the website to look at future shows, but I know we've also mentioned a couple times that Kingmaker Marketing Agency and Rudy Arrowood does a great job of keeping everybody updated and behind the scenes with the Light Opera Guild. But if someone's interested in volunteering or donating to the Light Opera Guild, can you go ahead and direct them on where the best places are to do that?
Yeah, a lot of the information that you'll see from that Rudy's producing now, it's on Facebook and Instagram. So we do have those two accounts, so you can start to follow us there. And then a lot of the information that we post regarding auditions, regarding volunteer opportunities, that all goes on Facebook. So that's our main piece of information that we try to get out posted on Facebook. They can go on the website, and there is a place to you can send us an email, or you can enter your email, so then we can send you updates through email. For example, I sent an email regarding this, our virtual panel today. I sent out earlier this week to the list of emails that we have. And so we try to keep people updated through that as well. So there are a couple of different ways that they can connect with us. And then usually, I will either get back with them, or if it's something regarding volunteering, I'll pass that on. If it's a specific question for Nina, she's great to respond. So we try to be, you know, as connected to everyone as we possibly can.
Right. And our website gives like an overview of the show and what the cast consists of. And actually, if you just type in and on your own little telephone or something, you can pull up information from the royalty company that describes it too. You just type the name of the show, that'll give you the name of the production to find out more about it, just as a show.
Right.
Wonderful, thank you. I know that we have a bit of a delay between when we are talking here ourselves and when it shows on Facebook. So I'll give everyone just a couple more seconds if they want to get any more of their last questions on. But while we wait for those to come in, I don't know if you all have a kind of a parting message to impart to the people who are watching this, the people who will be watching on YouTube, about the Light Opera Guild and what the future looks like for the Light Opera Guild, whether it's in regards to the performances, this new move to virtual content, really just how the world is coming together right now to share in the arts, and how that is providing healing and joy and things like that. What the Light Opera Guild is planning on doing.
Well, we're waiting to see if we can do our fall production. If we can't, we haven't had the conversation yet of, do we do something else to make ourselves alive in the interim of being able to be live again, or do we not? Because there are things we could do out there, but we certainly don't want anyone to become ill by coming to our shows or by rehearsing our shows. And it's still a little bit questionable that you can have audiences or rehearsal. And we understand that singing is one of the worst ways of contacting COVID. So we're just waiting and hoping we can do something soon. But if we can't, we'll figure out something to make us still be viable and alive, that'll keep the audiences and the fans and the people who like to audition and the youngsters learning about theater aware of us and aware of the area and musical theater.
Yeah.
Scott.
No, I mean, that's really well said, and that's true. I mean, we obviously hate how this year has panned out, as for many other organizations and companies. We definitely love producing musicals and having that be part of the arts community in Charleston, and especially part of Festival. So, once we had to basically just cancel most of our season this year, we really started trying to think of how we could still stay connected to our group and our followers and just the community in general. And so hopefully, we will be able to produce Elf. Again, we are still kind of having those discussions. And I think they're really good discussions. The board is very thorough in what we're trying to accomplish, but we're also trying to make sure that we're as safe as we can possibly be for not only the community, but also for every single one of our actors and every single volunteer. And so there's a lot to think about and a lot to kind of digest with everything that we keep hearing regarding this pandemic and how we can move forward. So we'll keep you as up to date as possible once a decision is made there. And if it turns out that for some reason that we can't produce Elf in the fall, then we'll put our thinking caps back on and see what we can possibly do to get out in front of you and make something happen. But we're still strong as ever. We still have a lot of emails and messages coming in asking when people can get involved, when the next show is going to be. So the interest is definitely there. We just want to make sure that we are being as safe as possible.
Okay, so we had a couple more questions come in, and then we'll wrap it up. Would Nina, there's a call here. Would you ever be willing to speak to students as a guest speaker in public schools? So I want to take you out on a speaking tour.
I would love that. Back in the day when I taught school at GW, I was a math teacher. I wasn't a theater teacher. I taught mathematics at all levels. But at that school, I found that I could involve more people in musical theater by doing it after school than if I had a class. Occasionally, I would have a little class in musical theater, and once it was with our Guild then director, Tom Murphy, and two of our musical directors at GW, who also directed music, Tom Turner and John Vankamp, who also were musical directors for the Light Opera Guild for a period of time. And but anyway, we taught a class, the four of us, on the appreciation of musical theater. And I'm sure some of the people who work with us now were in that class and remember it. But at that time, Tom used to go around to just about every high school, and I went with him and choreographed for him. I mean, we choreographed Kathy Mattea as Ado Annie in Oklahoma, and John Marshall taught over at DuPont High, which is no longer there, but I went over and did that with Tom, and we did it for Nitro High, you know. So, and Tom went to other schools. He went to South Charleston High School continually and did things. And I guess he did the choreography there himself, and they did it in a little different way. But all these high schools had musical theater programs, and it was fun to go to them. The last thing I remember doing like that was after Tom Murphy's no longer with us, and it was a group, I believe it was Cheryl Jividen, and I'm thinking she taught at Winfield maybe, and she brought her whole company of people to my dance school, and I taught them in 3 days Godspell. It's another fun show to do, and one of the characters in it was Mark Femia, who ended up being our accompanist for a number of years and even directed music for I believe one of our productions of MAME, our second MAME production. So you see kids grow up and have these abilities to carry on. I would love doing that. I really haven't been asked. Okay.
Well, there are some people on this feed that I think will likely be reaching out to you after this. And the last one, which may be a little complicated of a question, just because you do have productions at so many different theaters, but has the Guild ever thought about selling season subscriptions?
Yes, it's been a conversation that we've had, and we've tried to think of how we could possibly do it. But what you just said is what makes it so difficult. The fact that we are in so many different theaters, and especially with the Light Opera Guild Theater, it is first come, first served seating. So that's the only theater that we don't have reserved seats. So, you know, when you purchase your ticket for a Guild show at our theater, it's just, you know, a $20 ticket, and then you show up and just go and try to find a seat. Everywhere else, you know, you can reserve what specific seats you want. So it does make it a little bit more difficult. I mean, I think it would be something that I would love to see us do, because I think that in a way it would be easier, you know, especially when it comes to selling tickets for shows and trying to sell a complete season. But we're just not there yet. We haven't figured out the golden ticket idea to get us there.
There's a couple of other considerations too. We have been most fortunate in the fact that if there is a show, which every once in a while happens, that just cannot be cast, we can change the show, you know, and not do that show, put something else in and re-audition. Mm-hmm. And so when we do a show at the Clay Center, we're on their list of shows and they're selling the tickets. When we're in our building or at the Civic Center, we're selling tickets. So that adds to the confusion of putting together where you are, because you're not in the same locale. And plus you're playing from an audience of 225 to an audience that I said could fit 1,600 in there. So, and 725 or so at the Civic Center. So you're playing to a mix of sizes, and it makes it tricky. Yeah. You know, we'd be so lucky to have 725, you know, even sign up for a season ticket, you know.
Yeah.
So the final question is, will the Guild be doing more galas or like fundraising events in the future?
Yes, I would love to see us do another, you know, big event at some point. I don't know if it's going to turn into a yearly type of event or an annual event, but I definitely think everybody had a great time at the one that we had for the 70th year. I think it was well received. I think it was well timed. You know, the way that we did it tied in with Oklahoma and bringing back some of the past performers for that specific show. I think all of that went together to produce just a wonderful evening for everyone to really appreciate the Guild, have a chance to meet up with some people that maybe they haven't seen in years, and just have some nice conversations and a good time to hang out. I don't know how often those will happen, and I don't know if I'll ever plan another one. But
You didn't plan on doing that one, did you?
but I mean, it is something I think that could happen more often than not.
We probably will do something special for 75. And some of the people, when we were starting to work on 70, said, oh, we should wait till 75. But I'm so glad we didn't, because we have numbers of people in their 90s that are still they were in our production for that one day of Oklahoma, and they're so loyal to us, and they're loyal as audience members and have been for decades, and they used to be on our stage constantly, and we wanted to make sure everybody is inclusive as the charter members could be. So I'm glad we did that.
I'll say that I went to the 70th gala, and I really loved getting, fully dressed up to go see the show, and the experience that you had of the entire evening. I mean, granted, you guys behind the scenes, it's always a completely different experience for the day.
As you would know.
Right. Fair. But for those of us in the audience, it was just a really special evening, and kind of a nod to maybe a different time when people went to the theater and dressed in, like black tie, and just, it was really special the whole evening, and to celebrate the Guild. And what a tremendous job the two of you do, and just thank you so much for all of the time and talent and effort that I know that I must have a small glimpse of knowing how much of those things you put into making the Charleston Light Opera Guild shine as brightly as it does. So thank you for your contributions to the arts community, and for your contribution to Festival Virtual this year.
We'll expect you at auditions in the future, Maria.
Oh, I don't know about all that. Maybe. Nina heard me sing at Festival this year, and now she's.
Other leaders of Festival have been in our shows, both Larry Gross and Brittany Javin. So,
well, pressure's on now, then, I guess.
No,
I don't have a choice. I'm
like
being voluntold
for the job.
Yeah. Well, do you all have anything else? Any parting words you'd like to share?
We're an open organization. Don't be intimidated and not come down and audition. We have cast so many people that have never been in our building or been around us in leading roles in the past. And, My Fair Lady brought out a whole brand of new people that we hadn't seen, because they knew that stellar show's name and had seen the movie, I believe. And and sometimes it's a newer show that brings people out, like the Hairstays, which isn't that new anymore, I guess.
And what you'll find is, I think once you come and you're part of the organization, whether you're on stage or you're behind the scenes doing something, you just realize how much of a family truly we all are. And it's, some of my dearest friends come from my time at the Guild. And I think there are a lot of people that could probably say the same exact thing. So I think it's a wonderful organization. I'm honored to be part of it, but I really appreciate, obviously, you and your work with Festival, and letting us still, virtually be part of these couple of weeks. So well done to you for working on the fly.
Well, same to you all, and that's what everybody in the world is figuring it out here. So I'm thankful for your willingness to participate, and thank you all very much for joining us this evening. And feel free to check out festivalcharleston.com to enjoy the rest of Festival Virtual. We've got until June 28th to enjoy lots of art, music, theater, dance, and family fun, and so much more. Thank you all.
Bye.